Hello everyone, it's Darkseeker here. I'm a Hearthstone arena player, and this video showcases my most recent arena run, which went 12-0, so that's 12 wins and 0 losses, something that I was quite proud of. So I'm just going to go through in this video the drafting process, which we'll join partway through, and the various games in the run, and you'll get an idea of my thought processes and play style whilst going through the different games. So we're joining the drafting process partway through here. You can see some really good hunter cards already drafted in this deck. Two Glaive Zukas at the start is excellent in terms of early game board clearing, buffing up your minions with attack power. We've got Animal Companion, Unleash the Hounds, Gladiator's Longbow for sort of the end game. All of those cards are generally excellent. There's a second Animal Companion that I've just drafted. We've got the Bloodsail Raider, which synergizes very well with the Glaive Zuka. And also we've got Multi-Shot and Deadly Shot. Deadly Shot is excellent for clearing minions, big threats on the board, or a minion I should say, that you want to get rid of. We've got Sylvanas Windrunner for really gaining advantage on board by stealing an enemy minion, which is fantastic. You can see double Houndmaster, which synergizes very well with beasts in the deck in terms of giving them taunt. There's Scavenging Hyena, two of them, both excellent in terms of synergizing with beasts, especially early to mid game. There are a lot of early game beasts in this deck, and it would synergize very well with Unleash the Hounds. And I've just picked up my third Animal Companion, which is brilliant because you can consider the, let's say, turn 2 with a coin, if you've got it, playing that Animal Companion on turn 2, and then turn 3 if you've got Animal Companion in your hand, playing that on turn 3. So potentially a very strong early game to mid game here. And my final card is Sludge Belcher, which is a great taunt for the sort of the mid to late game, putting Sludge Belcher down the board, protecting your minions, allowing you to either go face or to trade effectively. So all in all, this is quite a solid deck. I wasn't sure, when I drafted it, I wasn't sure how many wins it would go. I was expecting at least 7 wins from this deck. I didn't know it'd go 12 wins, and of course it did go 12 wins. So, this first game is against a warrior. Warrior is probably my least favourite class in Arena to play, given that I think the warrior class in general struggles. I know that most people view it as the weakest Arena class. I think it's quite dependent on drawing weapons early game to clear the opponent's board, and even mid game as well. So we'll see what my opponent has. It is the first game in the series, so hopefully it'll be relatively straightforward. My opening hand is quite good. Marnie Berserker, Scavenging Hyena, Shattered Sun. I think that's pretty decent.
Greetings, traveler.
So, my opponent doesn't have anything on turn 1. And the decision here is whether I coin out the Hyena or the Amani Berserker. I think the Berserker is just stronger to play with the coin. Hopefully it will contest something that he plays. Well, my opponent plays the Gilbin Stalker, which is relatively strong. It's stealthed, so I can't target it. So I could either hero power or I could play my hyena. I think playing the hyena is the better option there. It gets something on the board. Yes, it will die to the stalker. That's an easy trade for my opponent to make. But I'd rather that happen than just hero powering. I think just playing the hero power is pretty weak. Although it's going to depend on what my opponent has here, what minion my opponent can play. And my opponent just armors up. That's really good for me. It's really, really good. Because now, of course, I've got Shattered Sun or Animal Companion, and I play the Companion, and I get myself a trade. So this is looking really good for me. I have board control. 2 minions on board that are both threatening in their own way. And my opponent uses a Shield Slam on the Berserker. I guess that makes sense. It's a 6/1. It can do 6 damage. And once again, my opponent doesn't have anything to play. Again, really good for me. So here, I decide to play the Haunted Creeper. It gets its attack power buffed up by 1, and I play the hero power. So I use all of my mana on that turn. I could have played the Shattered Sun Cleric for 3, but that would have wasted 1 mana. So I decided to try and be as efficient as possible. So here my opponent plays a Taunt. 2/5. Okay, this is not too threatening. The question is, how do I want to clear that taunt? What do I want to do? I could use the Shattered Sun and the Haunted Creeper, but I think I prefer to preserve the Haunted Creeper. I don't want it to die yet, so I play the Tundra Rhino, charge it in, and then go face with the Creeper. I think that's a relatively strong play here. It gives me 3 minions on board. The Death Rattle effect on the Haunted Creeper is still preserved. Right, Sunwalker. Really good card in Arena. You've usually got to invest a lot in order to kill the Sunwalker. And I play Animal Companion, and I get Misha, the Taunt. But notice that Misha has charge, so playing the Tundra Rhino on that previous turn turned out to be really good for me. The question, though, is how do I want to clear the Sunwalker? Well, I think throwing in the Haunted Creeper is sensible there. Buffing up Misha with the Shattered Sun Cleric is now a 6/5, and it trades very well into the Sunwalker. Misha is still alive as a 6/1, so that's really good for me. This board, for me, is looking quite threatening. So the question is, how does my opponent want to clear my board? Well, execute on Misha is absolutely fine, because Misha's done some good work already. So losing her to an execute is not a bad thing at all. The Boulder Fist Ogre, played by my opponent. Boulder Fist Ogre, a really strong arena card. It's 7 health. Again, this is like the Sunwalker. It's something that you've got to invest a lot of minions, spells, in order to clear. The question going through my mind, though, is do I trade into the Ogre? Do I clear it? Or do I go face? This is the question. I'm at 30 health. My opponent is at 21. So there's always a bit of calculating being done here. You know, what will happen if I go face? Well, my opponent gets put down to 1 health with the hero power, and I debate whether to play the Blood Cell Raider. I decide not to, just in case my opponent has a board clear, like Brawl. Well, at 1 health, unless there is a board clear, it's going to be very hard for my opponent to recover. That taunt isn't going to be enough for my opponent, because I'll simply clear it, and then I'll go face. And this game is pretty much over.
Well played.
And I just play Sylvanas, just to show off, just to show my opponent what I've got. So I trade hero power, face, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is game number 1 over. Okay, so we're heading into the second game here, and I believe the second game is against a rogue. And rogues are a really interesting class because they've got weapons and they've got spells that can do quite incredible burst damage. You know, when you least expect it, a rogue can kill you, clear your board. So I need to be careful here in terms of, let's say, not overcommitting too much onto the board. All my opponent would need to do is dagger up, add an attack buff onto a weapon, Blade Flurry, and I could lose everything. So I do need to be careful, considering the fact that my arena deck here does have a lot of early game. So it's probably not too hard, considering game 1 for instance, for me to load my board up and for my opponent to then just clear it very quickly. So let's see what my opponent does. It's turn 1. My opponent has the coin. Now my opponent passes, which lets me play a minion. Now I've got 2 scavenging hyenas, so if I lose one of them, I'm not too bothered, to be honest. So, turn 2, dagger up, that's a tip, and pass, that's a typical rogue move on turn 2. And Animal Companion gives me Huffer, now that's 4 damage to the face, charged to the face. And as you can see, my opponent is now down to 24 health, and that's not bad for turn 2. Goblin Auto Barber, giving my opponent's weapon a buff there. That's pretty annoying. Pretty annoying. Because my opponent's also played Annoyatron, and as the name suggests, it is also annoying. Because I've got to find a way now to get through the Divine Shield, and there are various decisions I could make here. I could unleash the hounds, put 2 hounds on the board, charge one of them in, clear the shield. Or I could use Shattered Sun Cleric or the Houndmaster. The question is, what's the most efficient method? I'm not really a fan of any of those methods because my opponent is going to be able to clear whatever I put down quite easily. I think I end up going with the Houndmaster. In hindsight, I probably should have gone with the Hounds or Shattered Sun Cleric, to be honest. Because the Houndmaster is just going to die to whatever my opponent has. And so I'd prefer to sacrifice the Shattered Sun rather than the Houndmaster. So in hindsight, this was probably a misplay. My opponent has all of the tools required to clear both of those minions. So we'll see what my opponent does here. Although in hindsight again, if I'd played Shattered Sun, it's conceivable that the Annoyatron would have lived based on the trades that my opponent could make. So maybe the Houndmaster was better after all, perhaps. So there we go, my opponent has to trade the weapon charge in as well, clear the Houndmaster. So yeah, maybe the Houndmaster was good there. So right now, it's a question of getting something on the board, getting some form of board presence. So the most sensible option is the Bloodsoul Raider, Shattered Sun Cleric. Now, neither of them contests the Tall Strider, or the Chicken as I like to call it, because it's got 4 health. Both of my minions have 3. So my opponent makes a trade and then plays Bomb Knobber, and that's really good for my opponent. My opponent has board control here. So the question is, what can I do now to try and get the board back? So I could unleash the hounds. I've got Glaive Zuka. That could help me. But I decide to hero power and pass, and I'm getting quite greedy here. What I'm looking for is value from Unleash the Hounds. The more minions that my opponent plays, the more hounds I can put on the board. I have a feeling that maybe my opponent senses this, sees this. So my opponent plays a Spectral Knight at 6 health, being quite hard to remove. It can't be targeted by spells. That's quite a smart play there. So I think my only option here now is I have to start putting things on the board. If I don't, I think I'm just dead. So Unleash the Hounds is quite sensible to start off with. And then I'm sort of contemplating Houndmaster perhaps, or Glaive Zuka and Scavenging Hyena. So I go with the Hyena and Glaive Zuka. I buff up a Hound there, it becomes a 2-1. And now it's a question of how do I efficiently trade on the board. I could go all in and kill the Spectral Knight, but no, I want to clear 2 minions. So, and I want to get some value on the Hyena. So I'm going to clear the Bomb Lobber there as well. That was a misplay on my part. I should have traded in the 1 attack Hound into the Bomb Lobber and preserved the 2 attack Hound. So that was a misplay. So I was hoping that my opponent would trade Spectral Knight into the Hyena. And there's the rogue being a rogue, playing sap, sending the Hyena back to my hand. That's really good for my opponent, because now I have no board. My opponent has 2 very strong minions on board. The Scarlet Crusader has Divine Shield. That's very, very strong. So now I need to think about what's going to get me board presence. Well, I've got the River Croc, the Hyena and the Houndmaster with Beast Synergy here. So this is really good. I can taunt up one of those minions and I choose to taunt up the River Croc. It's a 4-5. That's pretty good. And I pop the Divine Shield. Also very good. So now this is quite awkward for my opponent to trade into. Unless, of course, there's a spell. And being a rogue, yes, Fan of Knives does the trick. It allows the Spectral Knight to trade efficiently, and now it allows the Crusader to kill the Hyena. So, all in all, this is not looking great. My opponent has the board, in terms of control. Although, Gladiator's Longbow, really good for me, because 5 attack, I don't take any damage when trading, and I can kill my opponent's taunt minion cleanly. The question now is, do I trade with the Spectral Knight, or do I go face? And I made that decision quite quickly there, going face, because in my mind here, I don't have the advantage. My opponent has more cards than me. I need to kill my opponent as quickly as possible. I was banking on the fact that my opponent didn't have a spell there to clear the Houndmaster. My opponent didn't, so my opponent had to trade, which is good for me, but now my opponent is unloading on the board. So naturally you play whatever you've got, you hero power, and it's decision time. I have a 5 attack weapon. Do I kill the River Croc, which has 3 health, or do I go face? The decision gets made. I go face, because I'm now banking on the fact that my opponent can't kill me. My opponent has 8 damage on board, 1 damage from a weapon, that's 9. My opponent needs 2 damage to finish me off. Now, for a rogue with spells, what are the chances my opponent has 2 damage? It's quite likely. So, I'm taking a gamble here. There's nothing else I can do. If I traded, I would have lost. If I'd killed the River Croc with a weapon, my opponent didn't have any spells to kill me or a charge minion, and so I win. The gamble paid off, and that, ladies and gents, is game number 2. Right, so we're heading into the 3rd game here, and the third game is against a shaman. Interestingly, the name of the player is Silent Storm, who I believe is a pro player. Now, I don't know if it's the real Silent Storm or the one that I'm thinking of, but we can pretend that it is. So against a shaman, this opening hand is looking reasonable. I've got Glaivezuka, Bloodcell Raider there, so I can hopefully remove something that he plays in the early game. We'll see what he plays here. If memory serves correct, I believe it was, yes, the Whirling Zap-O-Matic, and that's a really dangerous card because of the Wind Fury effect. It can do 6 damage to you each turn. So my opponent was gambling on the fact that I can't remove that. Thankfully I can, so I play the Glaivezuka, and I'm able to remove that minion, and that's really critical. The number of games that I've lost in the past due to that Whirling Zap card is ridiculous. So we remove it, and here we've got synergy with the Bloodcell Raider, because now the attack buff is applied. It's got 4 attack, and I can clear the totem. I think clearing totems is a really, really important thing when facing shamans, because if you let the totems get out of control, your opponent can flood the board. It can become quite dangerous, and because those totems can be buffed, and then you're really in trouble. So here, my opponent used Earth Shock. I think that was a bit of a waste, because, well, I've made the trade anyway. So now I put down the River Croc and the Direwolf Alpha, just to get some board presence, and my opponent plays the Oasis Snapjaw. That's really good at contesting the Direwolf Alpha there. So I need to think about clearing, so I make a trade, and then this is where I believe I misplay, because I shouldn't have traded. I go with the Tundra Rhino, I attack in, and here I realise, yes, with 3 attack, the Tundra Rhino isn't going to kill the Snapjaw, so I end up trading the Direwolf Alpha. A really, really bad misplay. Perhaps I should have used Deadly Shot. Actually, no. Looking at the minion just played there, I think Deadly Shot was actually good to use on this minion, so probably a good thing that I saved Deadly Shot in hindsight, and now I go face. Okay, so I've got a board here, 3 minions. That's really good. My opponent is overloaded, only has 5 mana, so plays a Spectral Knight. We saw, I think we saw the Spectral Knight in the previous game. This is a really good card. It can actually contests every minion on the board. So now the only sensible option is to play the hyena and to taunt up. And I'm just thinking about what should I taunt. Well, I'll taunt the rhino, trade in both beasts. I want to preserve the Haunted Creeper because of the Death Rattle effect. I'd prefer to utilise it later on. And now my opponent is playing reactively here, putting stuff on the board. My board is stronger. And now, well, play the hyena, play Unleash, and trade to get some hyena value. So kill off the 2/3 with my Houndmaster. I think that's a sensible trade. And then trade in 2 hyenas. And now watch the Scavenging Hyenas. They get buffed up, which is really good. So for every beast that dies, both of those minions get buffed. And now my opponent is in quite a challenging position. I'm slightly scared of Lightning Storm here, but no, at least one of my hyenas would survive because of the 6 health. So what does my opponent have? Well, a taunt. Okay, I can deal with that. Totem. Probably going for the spell power totem there, because yes, my opponent, well, it's got Lightning Storm. Unfortunately, I don't think it's enough. The hyenas get buffed up again, and that's it. that, ladies and gents, is game number 3 in the bag. Right, so we're now heading into game number 4, and I'll be going up against a paladin. Paladin is a class that I rate very highly. In fact, I think it's the best class in Arena. Early game cards such as Shielded Minibot, very annoying to remove. The Paladin also has a selection of weapons: True Silver Champion, Sword of Justice, Cog Hammer. These cards really give the Paladin insane value. So we'll see how this game turns out in terms of what cards my opponent plays. My opening hand is relatively decent. I've got 2 2-drops there. This Paladin seems quite aggressive. Already on turn 1 my opponent plays a 2-1 minion. So the River Croc there that I play is pretty decent in terms of contesting it. But it will depend on what my opponent plays next. Okay, so the Imani Berserker gets played. And for me, well, I get the Glaive Zuka, which is absolutely perfect, because now I can take down both enemy minions. I can trade in with the Croc and attack with the Glaive Zuka, and now I have the board. And the Swampu's there, fantastic value for my opponent, gets rid of my weapon, and then playing Humility. So typical Paladin shenanigans with Humility there. But luckily for me, Animal Companion gives me Leok, and I can make a very clear and easy trade. So once again, back with the board, and my opponent plays Argent Protector, another card that makes the Paladin an excellent class in Arena. That Argent Protector has just given his 3-2 minion a Divine Shield. So I have no choice but to trade by killing off his 2-2, and then I play the Imani Berserker with the hero power. So now my opponent has a choice. Which minion does he want to kill? Does he want to kill Leok, the 2-2, or kill the Imani Berserker? It depends on what he sees as more threatening. He sees the Berserker as more threatening, which is fair enough. And now I think I've only got one choice here. On curve, Sludge Belcher. The Belcher contests both of the enemy minions, kills one of them and puts a dent in the other, so it's not a bad play. The good thing is that I've got options in my hand. I've got several high value cards there that can all do some good work for me. Consecration, fantastic card for the Paladin. Again, another card that makes Paladin one of the best classes in Arena. And just like that, my opponent has the board, and I've lost board control. So I need to find a way to get the board back, and looking through the options in my hand, I think the best option is Sylvanas. Because in order to kill Sylvanas, my opponent would have to trade in 2 minions, and Sylvanas would then steal what's left. So the typical strategy to deal with Sylvanas is to ignore her and just attack, go face, trade with other minions, flood the board, and that's exactly what my opponent is doing here. So I've got really a very straightforward play here. The only play I can make, which is Animal Companion and then Taunt Up Leok. Now that's pretty good for me because Leok has got 6 health, and that's going to be really difficult for my opponent to beat. My opponent's going to have to throw in a number of minions. So my opponent plays a War Golem, which is pretty threatening to me, but Leok here is proving to be valuable. It's absorbed a number of attacks. And what was going through my head here was, well, I'd really want to steal a minion. Really want to steal a minion. So maybe this trade wasn't great. Maybe I should have just put Sylvanas into the 2-2. But I do it this way. Stealing 7-2, which was good for me. Using the Shattered Sun there to buff up the War Golem, and then playing the Emperor Cobra, hero power, and I've got quite a threatening board. My opponent would need Consecration again, but my opponent only has one card in hand, so what are the chances? Nope. So, going face, that's all my opponent can do. So, despite the perhaps slightly inefficient trade I made earlier with Sylvanas, things have worked out for me. I've got the board here. And now it's a decision of how I want to trade, which minions I want to kill. So, I think playing the Cult Master is probably a sensible option, and that's what I end up doing. Keeping in mind that Consecration is a threat here, I may as well trade in the 4-1, draw a card, see what I get. I get a Hyena. Now, I end up playing the Hyena, so clearly now not playing around Consecration. But what are the chances my opponent has it? Maybe it is just best for me to flood the board and then go face. And the key thing there is the War Golem with 8 attack went face. That's the absolute key thing. Doing damage to my opponent, putting the Paladin down to 13, and Mind Control Tech. Really powerful card. Stole the Emperor Cobra, which wasn't enough, because my opponent needed the War Golem, and there's the victory. I had enough for lethal. Thank you very much for watching this first video. There is one more video with the remaining games yet to come. Thank you. Before moving on to the next set of games in the series, I just wanted to take a moment to reflect on the previous game. Something that troubled me after the game was the attack that I made using Sylvanas. I used my 4-3 Houndmaster to kill my enemy's 2-2 minion, and I attacked Sylvanas into the 7-7 War Golem in the hopes of stealing it. I was successful in stealing the Golem, however, perhaps the cleaner play would have been simply to throw Sylvanas into the 2-2 and to get a War Golem at full health. So my play caused me to acquire a damaged War Golem. Now on reflection, I think perhaps that was okay. After all, if I stole the Haunted Creeper, dealing with a full health War Golem on the next turn may have been a problem. If the Golem was damaged at 2 health and I didn't steal it, it would have been easy to remove using the Houndmaster. So all in all, perhaps that play was okay, but it's still a play that does bug me a little bit, just thinking about whether it was the right call or not.